consider just going to the.
I don't know if it is, I don't have anything tonight.
You should have though. You could just put your earbuds in or.
Yeah, I could have zoomed, but I guess you're right. Until you asked me a question. What?
The last. Jason Jones was at the last design review meeting. We had a hearing from somebody at a bar. Said straight up, I'm at a bar, it's hard to hear. So that's the first.
I guess commendable too.
From somebody else, somebody was just talking about in a public hearing, somebody showed up while they were drinking beer.
Yep. That happened at our last design review.
On a Zoom, on Zoom,
On
on
Zoom,
Zoom.
correct.
That's incredible.
No, as a member of the public.
Yeah. There's just so many of the commission.
That is bold.
That would be bad.
Gotta get your public comment in.
All right, let's see here. How is everything on recording and
Yep.
we're all good?
Yeah, recording's in progress. No one is in the waiting room to test audio. So
Simple
it
stuff.
should be on.
All right, well, let's call to order then the June 15th, 2022 meeting of the Garden City Planning and Zoning Commission. Let the record can show that all commissioners are present except for Commissioner Shepherd. And then we can stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, any changes to the agenda? Staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have under public hearing items, subdivision fiscal year 2022-0002 Honsick Townhome subdivision should be moved to the consent agenda as the applicant has requested it to be moved to July 20th, 2022 and not heard tonight.
Okay, thank you. All right, then, that does take us to the consent agenda, which then now contains the minutes from our May 18th, 2022 meeting. Also, as noted on the agenda, SUB FY 2022-3, which will be moved to a date uncertain. CUP FY 2021-12 will be moved to the date certain of July 20th, 2022. And then now just with this change, sub FY 2022-2 also moved to the date certain of July 20th, 2022. So I believe that covers our consent agenda. So I think we're ready for a motion. on
Mr.
that.
Chair, just a
Sure.
point of clarification.
Commissioner Wild.
I think move to a date uncertain for the Binnion subdivision. We probably just a detail. I think it's tabled indefinitely. I
Okay.
don't think we're moving. I mean, when we say move to a date certain, that's because I don't know if it's Robert's rules or the code requires it, but I think so. Just a same thing.
Okay.
Tabled
Okay.
indefinitely.
Tabled indefinitely. Okay. All right. So that's great. And I think we can do that with our motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wild.
move to approve the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from the last meeting in May and all of the items for JST Properties LLC application to be moved to July 20, and for the Honsick Townhome subdivision to be moved to July 20th, and for the Binnion Subdivision item B to be moved or tabled indefinitely.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So then we just have our one item on the agenda this evening, and it is our work session. CPA FY 2022-3. This City of Garden City is proposing that the city code be amended to modify the design review application process that refines the function of the design review committee. Purpose of these amendments is to simplify the design review process to better achieve the design review committee's intended charge. The changes will include, but not limited to, changes to Garden City Code as listed on the agenda: 8-2C, 8-4B, 8-4F, 8-6A-2, 8-6A-3, 8-6A-4, 8-6A-5, 8-6A-6, 8-6A-7, 8-6A-9, 8-6B-3, 8-6B-5, 8-6B-8, 8-6A-2. Probably didn't need to read all those, but so that said, we'll just move right into the discussion with our staff.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the commission. The reason for the proposed amendments to all of those sections of code that were just read out is to intend to simplify the design review process. When the design review committee was established in 2008, the intent was that it could be a working group committee to interactively interact with applicants to guide projects to be better. There have been some deficiencies within current code that have really altered the way that that committee functions. And because if you look at where it's enabled, it's really enabled through the state's local land use planning act, where they're really a subcategory of this commission if you go through the enabling on how the committee is allowed. And because of that, and they're a deciding body as well as a recommending body, applicants and the public really have the right for due process. And so that can be a little bit clunky as it goes through the process, because the design review committee, those experts in their field, are intending to interact with the applicant, but still having to have some level of a more formalized public hearing. And then almost all of the items that go through that process, if there's any interest whatsoever, end up being triggered at an appeal hearing with the city council as well. And so the intent is to get back to more of that interactive group, and just if a hearing is triggered, to have it be triggered at the city council level. And instead of having to have two hearings and maybe multiple hearings through the process, which can be burdensome for staff starting, certainly for the volunteers that are on that committee, the public and the applicants. And so the proposed change right now is to not call them a committee that would be enabled through LUPA, the Local Land Use Planning Act, but to consider them to be consultants, and then get back, and staff would be the final decision-making body with the city council and those with standing able to trigger a hearing at the city council level. The hope is that the work sessions with the consultants or consultant would be more productive, in that the Roberts rules and the process wouldn't need to be adhered to. And certainly the city hopes that this proposal still would get public input, but through a different channel, through written comments. And then if those written comments were received, those individuals would have standing to trigger the hearing. That's in essence what the changes. The city's legal department is working to make sure that all of the details are captured in code. Hence that long line of code that's being proposed to change is really going through and changing anywhere it says design review committee to design review consultant in most instances. And then the process itself would need to be changed. With that, I stand for questions, comment, open discussion, or however, whatever we need to discuss.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Brown.
First, a question for the chairman. I assume that this particular format, that this questioning would be more of a nature of questions and a sort of a discussion sort of combined. Would that be appropriate?
That would be appropriate in my mind.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say, as usual, you guys did a really good job in something, and I might make a comment. When I was first appointed as a commissioner in the P&Z was right at the time when we were breaking off and forming the Design Review Committee. In fact, I believe that both the P&Z Commission meeting, my very first one, was the same month that that was the first time the P&Z Commission was independent from the design review process, and when the Design Review Committee at that time met. So I was sort of right in on it when it started. And that being said, you did a really good job of putting this together. I do have two little areas I'm gonna ask some questions and then I'm gonna sort of enter into a discussion on it. Now, the first one is on page 7. And I think it's excellent that it's in there, but I'm gonna read paragraph 2 on step 1 on the application on the processing under administrative with notice procedures. In paragraph 2, it says documents as required by planning official to ensure adequate review and legal well-being, including but not limited to elevations, landscaping, connectivity, etc., will be provided to the city at the time of application submittal. Incomplete application will not be processed. And I really think that last sentence is very important. A lot of time has been wasted on this commission, and I'm sure as well on the Design Review Commission, when applications have been presented that weren't ready. And so my question is, then I presume that the real person that's going to make that decision of whether they're incomplete is the planning official. Is that correct?
Chairman, that would be Commissioner Brown, that would be correct.
What would your thoughts be if we made a recommendation that be more explicit? In other words, if we put a line in there that explicitly said that decision about whether or not they were complete or incomplete would be made by the planning official. I think it might possibly result in make it apparent that it wouldn't be questioned about who had the power to make that decision.
Okay.
It maybe, so that's the first one. And I really think that is an important thing that needs to be in there.
So Kent, are you saying the planning official would make that determination at the receipt of the application before it ever gets in front of a design consultant?
Yeah, that's the intent of it, if I understand it. If the
So we're not
staff,
wasting time.
the reality is the staff is deciding, they're going to be the deciding official, but they're also going to be the staff. Really, that young woman right there looking at us is the one that really is going to make the decisions. I think it ought to be right in here so that the applicant, everybody else that looks at this understand who has the right of the power to make that decision. Okay. And that's my first thought. Well, why don't I go ahead and then see if somebody,
For sure.
if somebody else can do that. Okay. I would like on page 8, we're talking about oral testimony and the fact that it won't be permitted in a work session. Number 4 under step 5. Jenna, how do you envision that would work. For example, would the applicant, I presume that they would be able to respond to questions and stuff at a work session, which would be an oral response. They will be do that. But when you're saying that oral testimony, not in a formal sense, like would be in a hearing, is that what the intent is?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, that is the intent, that the applicant would have more of a full reign to interact with the consultants, or whereas the public would need to submit written documents to have standing.
I'm not exactly sure what the wording is, but we might want to, and the rest of you, when you do this, I think that might be a little, if we put a line in there that made it clear that what we're saying is that, in effect, what we're saying is there won't be public testimony taken at this work session, in the sense that kind of oral testimony won't be provided by the public, but make it clear that the applicant would be expected to discuss orally what they're doing. I'm not exactly what the wording should be, but understand what I'm saying?
Do
I wouldn't want the applicant to think, well, they're just going to be there with what they presented and not get an opportunity to interact with them, if I understand what the intent is. All the rest of it looks really good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Montoya.
I have a question regarding the work session. Is the work session going to be limited to staff and the new, not the, the design consultant exclusively to provide feedback on the application that will then be provided to the applicant?
Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, that's something that we haven't quite worked through as of yet. There has been that discussion. We've talked about the potential of just recording the meetings and putting those on the city's YouTube channel, of allowing individuals to be present, or having some sort of maybe a Zoom so individuals could see the process as it occurs. We've talked about the importance of being transparent for sure, but then allowing people to come and sit and partake, it might be difficult to maintain the orderly review of the project. And so we haven't quite worked through that as of yet.
And is there any discussion on having the applicant participate to answer questions or discussions with them on any items that might be requested for change, or some explanation that would be needed?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, I think that's actually a great suggestion that we haven't thought through. So maybe if there are a large number of questions, that we come back at a later date and have further discussions and perhaps revised plans. I think that's a great suggestion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Brown.
Commissioner Montoya, if with your permission, I would like to make a comment on your question, and pertinent to this, based on my experience at the Highway District. Long time ago now, when I want to think about it, but I started working at the Highway District as the manager of engineering in 1991, and for the first about 8 years, when we had work sessions, and an interest to be that the public was allowed to come into the work session when it was on the agenda. It was a work session, but the chairman of the Highway District Commission for about 8 years were very explicit. They would inform the people if they were coming. They were not part of the work session. They were there, just there to monitor it. And then we did get a new chairman who didn't agree with that. who felt that at the work sessions, the citizens that came in there and were listening to it should be consulted and allowed to make statements. It destroyed the effectiveness of the work sessions. I mean, it literally destroyed them. I'm speaking as somebody from the staff viewpoint. Whereas the work sessions had been something for the staff, the experts were on the staff, or in some cases, an expert consultant that was brought in at a work session would be part of that, could participate. By having the public, we got people in there that were interested in disrupting the process was going on. For example, it really made it difficult for progressing on the West Park Center Bridge. And I would think that the fact that at that point in time that they were allowing to do that, I can't tell you how many work sessions, there were many work sessions having to do with the bridge. And it materially delayed the process to do because that had been allowed. And of course, there are others that would disagree with me. They would think that it was an opportunity for the public to do what they did in that sense of disrupt it. But that is what happened when the public was allowed to make oral testimony in a work session.
Thank you. Follow-up
Yep.
question?
Go ahead. Go ahead,
So-
Commissioner Montoya.
So in the post-work session, item number 2, page 9, it says, so Garden City staff will notify interested parties of the decision. Number 2, if there are revisions to the proposal, once revisions are received, the interested parties will receive notice at least 10 days before the subsequent meeting with the consultant. So is that meant to be where they can resubmit with changes for another round?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, exactly. So they may meet with the design review, getting back to that original intent with just a sketch on a napkin was kind of the tagline in 2008. They may come back a number of times and we would want the interested parties to be aware of any changes as it goes through the process.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question. My question is going back to the application process and specifically what Commissioner Brown was talking about with the application and having the planning official be able to approve or deny the application.
Mhm.
Is the application going to be explicit enough where it's going to be not subjective, but objective as to what's needed so that there's no questions?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, hopefully, we're certainly in an effort of looking at our code to make it more objective right now. The problem in being is trying to think through every situation where every property has its own unique constraints, and there may be a constraint that's not codified, where there may be information that might be needed. I don't have a great example, but perhaps there's a specific irrigation district that runs through a piece of property that functions slightly differently than other irrigation districts. And so I think that not limited to would be if staff is unable to determine legality, and maybe that where it becomes objective is additional language saying to determine legality, where we can put the sideboards out there a little bit more to keep it from turning into a runaway train.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the planning official will be the one to make the findings and decision, correct?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, that's correct.
Is that currently how it is right now?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, no, it is not. And so, well, for the acceptance, if all the documents that are identified within code are provided and they show sufficient detail to review code, then they will receive an acceptance letter. However, the final decision is either with the design review committee or if they're a recommending body with the city council.
So, is there any question or issue with any delegation of authority or authority to change the way that the approval or recommendation is being made?
Chairman Commissioner Montoya, if this change were to go through, it's our legal department's opinion that they could no longer be a final decision-making body or a formal recommending body. So they would be a consultant with a review that would then be incorporated in Hannah's report, and she would become that final decision-making maker.
And the legal department doesn't have any issue with the planning director or planning official having that authority?
Chairman, Councilmember Montoya, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Montoya.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wild.
Maybe less question, more comment. And I'll just say, design review, I've been here almost as long as Kent. Design review really has morphed and because, I don't know, runaway, it is a runaway train, has been a runaway train. You know, the original intent, I thought, was always that they reviewed the design, as the name would suggest. It was an architect sitting in a room, sketching out ideas, giving the applicant ideas. And it's become something so much greater than that. So I think this is intending to get back to that point where it's not a volunteer, it's a paid third-party consultant with expertise, right? I think putting it on Zoom or letting the public comment is a mistake. I would suggest strongly that you not do that. If the intent is to produce the best product, and so long as there are opportunities for due process along the way with us or with the city council, leave the hearing, leave the public out of the first part of that. Just improve the application, get the design right. So I guess my overriding theme is pick a path. And it seems like we're trying to do, like, we're not sure if we want to let the public in, or, you know, we're gonna pay them, but they're not staff. I think we just need to pick a good path that we're comfortable with and try, instead of trying to do everything. And I think right now they're trying to do everything.
Commissioner Wild, when you're saying that, what is your position on having the applicant able to attend to be able to hear the dialogue and the narrative from the experts?
At the meeting itself, at the design consultant meeting itself. I think they have to be present. Am I wrong that would be a meeting between them and the design consultant and staff? I think.
Yeah, I just was not clear if that was the case or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. I assume the applicant, staff, and design consultant or consultants. And I would suggest strongly that you pick a path. It's either one or two or three design consultants who are in that room are all there, right? That's how the application gets better.
Chairman Commissioner Wild, yes, the intent is that the applicant would be present at the meeting and the interaction would really be between the paid experts and the applicant themselves.
That's all I have.
That's all you had? All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Brown.
I do have a question that Matt, Mr. Chairman, Matt prompted. The people that are working as in this consultant, but on this board, this board that is a consultant board, they're going to be paid. Is that correct?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, the discussions that we've had internally is yes, they would be paid. We have not had the work session with the design review committee as of yet. And that's certainly a question that we'd like to flesh out with them on what that would look like to be an incentive to stay not on the committee, but on the consultant team, I guess.
Well,
But
then that
in-
prompted the question on the following question. Then is there a necessity in this? Have some kind of analysis of the fiscal impact to the city budget? Is there a requirement that should be in here somewhere?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, that's a great idea. The discussion has been that it would be a pass-through fee essentially and just recuperated through the permitting fees.
Okay.
So. sorry.
Commissioner Weil?
Imagine that first design consultant meeting. Are they producing a written product for you, staff? Are they recommending something through that process? Or is there no deliverable that comes out of that meeting?
Chairman, Commissioner Wild, we've discussed that as well. Right now, we've discussed having a very similar process as what we currently have, where staff would do the initial review, mark things that are not clearly compliant with code or may need discussion, and then really have a discussion and incorporate their discussion back into the staff report and decision document. And so, no, the answer is no, we would not be asking for formal reports from each of the consultants.
Last dumb question. Bottom of page 9. There's a workflow. It's the middle says work session with design consultants. Decision rendered by staff, presumably. Where in that flow, like currently there's a little bit of back and forth with this body and design review. Where are we in that workflow?
Chairman Commissioner Wild, that's a fantastic question. And I'm not sure that we have an answer to that. Well, I know we don't have an answer to that yet. And I think that's a great discussion point with you right now. Would you prefer that be completed before it comes to you? Say it's a recommendation for subdivision, or would you prefer that it be concurrent for to expedite the applications going through the city?
My general thought is that, CUPs and subdivisions and PUDs would come to us.
Mhm.
But for things that merit staff level approve, those kinds of things, if there is some disagreement, those ought to be direct appeal to the city council. That just off the top of my head, feels like planning and zoning ought to be doing planning and zoning things. And those three, at least that I list, are that.
Is it? Sorry to interject here. I don't know if can I interject? Go ahead. I guess to carry that thought maybe a tad further, if there is a design review work session scheduled, and I'm thinking this through as I say it, it would be, in my mind, because I think what you brought up was a great topic, but it feels to me like where that decision rendered spot is in the workflow, that if our hearing on the item could be after that. But I don't know if you guys support that, but yeah. If it's going to come to us, if it is something like, something we're going to recommend to city council or whatever, or I mean, somebody wants to build a new building that's going to end up being a CUP or something, just as examples. I don't know, it feels to me cleaner that if all that was done, then it came to us.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown.
No, I haven't. I agree. Just think of we've had a whole series this year. Seems to be more that have been sort of problem plan unit developments, which we have in our process on several occasions when we finally got to the point where we approved them. We pushed a lot of stuff off onto design review because we perceived that was in their bailiwick, not ours. And what I'm saying, given what has happened there, I would support what you said with regard to where we would come in on one of those. If we didn't, if we tried to make it concurrent, I can see a lot of problems, because if we try to make it concurrent and they haven't done that, we're going to wind up with hearing a lot of stuff that should be in their bailiwick of them making the decision along with that consulting, having to do with the design specific, like, for example, does the facade meet our requirements of what we're doing? And those design elements that I'm not criticizing us for putting them on there, because that was where it would be. But what I'm trying to say is if we don't have that much done already where the design has been made on that design elements, then we're going to wind up hearing a lot of stuff that we would want them to have decided. It seems to me.
There's
So
great potential for that.
absolutely. So, well, I'm supporting what you said is where it ought to go. On those where they have to come for us. And he gave a list, pretty much exhaustive.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what that list is, but, you know, local land use planning act probably does describe all those types of applications that this body has to do, I think, that can't just go directly to the city council.
The other thing I was thinking about, and I wasn't thinking about it until we started talking about it, but I was just reviewing, actually preparing for this meeting tonight, was, and I can't remember what the document's called, but something that the legal department sent to us before the last meeting, I think it was, and it was basically an overview of Robert's rules. And on the last page of that thing, there was some discussion about work sessions and public testimony. So I don't know if does the city have a position on how to handle public testimony on work sessions, or is that part of Idaho code or something about public testimony at work sessions? Because if I remember correctly, and I could be not remembering it correctly, that legal department, legal team said basically you need to have public testimony at work sessions. So I'm just trying to pin that down. That's all I'm trying to do.
I have an opinion about that.
Okay.
Work sessions are commonly, that's a phrase commonly used for public bodies like this.
You're right.
When you're not going to make a decision, you're just working through, and the public is welcome to come.
Okay.
I think the intent here, and I would support that, is that this is a closed door design consultation. And maybe the answer is don't use the phrase work session.
Yes.
Call it a design review consultation.
Absolutely.
Good suggestion.
Then we kind of avoid that.
That's
debate about
what I was
whether-
trying to get to. Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's not going to be a public body pursuant to the open meetings law. That's important. I
It's a
think.
consultation.
Yeah, it's a, I mean, and maybe, maybe you have it here with the door open, and you don't kick anybody out, but you also don't recognize them to speak.
Mhm.
I mean, that gets hard on some applications probably, but I would suggest you not do that. I would suggest you keep the door closed and consider it not to be a public meeting that requires notice, and changes to the agenda have to be formally noticed 48 hours in advance, and all those things that come along when you call it a public meeting, whether or not you're soliciting input and open with your to take testimony.
And I want to, as you already heard, what I said, I gave you the example of the highway district. That's exactly what happened in the highway district in work sessions. When they started inviting the public to participate in the work session, it destroyed them as a work session.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great suggestion, maybe not call it a work session.
Yeah.
I have that document that he gave.
All right. Commissioner Montoya, absolutely.
So just in the process, and I'm looking at that flow chart as well. So it starts with submit to city and receive 300-foot radius list. You have the neighborhood meeting. So is there any thought of, because I like where Commissioner Wild was going, where it feels more like, almost like a pre-app meeting, where you're going in, you're just talking to you and then the consultant or expert about what you're planning on doing, so they have some guidance, rather than some sort of open meeting where there's officials or planning officials.
That's how I was thinking of it. That's kind of just like a pre-application meeting.
Yeah. So I do like that. The other, and this is just me getting nitpicky, and just when I read this, it triggered me to think, is this correct? So on page 6, F, proposed changes, paragraph 3, it says the consultant is no longer a body that provides hearings, but rather an expert advisor to the applicant during the work session. And it sounded weird that it's an expert that's advising the applicant. Is that truly how it's intended to be? Because it almost seems like at that point, there's some sort of maybe not alignment with intentions or obligations and responsibilities to the city. So I didn't think that, I would say maybe an expert to assist staff and the planning director or the planning
Thank you.
decision maker.
I get what you're saying. That's probably not the right word for that spot. Yep. Leave it to the board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else by the commission for
Sorry.
staff? No, you go right
One
ahead,
more.
Commissioner Montoya.
On the diagram as well, the reason why I started asking questions on item number 2 and post work session is I was just unclear of a resubmittal process. And a lot of times when you're in the design and the pre-design, you will get feedback from staff or the expert, where then you'll want to resubmit. It looks like it goes straight from work session where you're getting some sort of directive then to decision rendered. It seems like there could be a little bit more explanation that there could be a resubmission process and it's just not going to finality. Thank you. I'm done now.
You're doing great. Okay, thank you. Anybody else for staff? Any other questions?
My last question
Yeah.
is, I mean, we've given you some feedback here. What's the next step? To revise the code, perhaps have more meetings, talk about what the code amendment would look like in its final form before it goes forward. And then it comes to us
Correct.
to consider and recommend to city council.
Chairman Commissioner Wild, right now it's noticed to be back in its final form in July in front of you. You can always slow that down and say that you think it needs additional work sessions. I think the comments tonight were incredibly helpful and really thought through some things that we had failed to think through. And so hopefully we can incorporate those. And if you don't feel that it's ready for adoption yet, you can certainly slow it down.
Very good. Commissioner Brown?
That made me comment. I don't think that we need to slow it down. We don't have to make that decision. I would suggest we can suggest that we assume we've given enough so that hopefully it will come through in July. It'll be ready to go with some, and at that point, we'd be free to offer some minor changes and stuff. But my thoughts, is that what you're thinking?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, certainly at a hearing, even if you move it forward, you can recommend changes to the
Sure.
ordinance.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I guess we do need to check to see if anybody is out there. Speaking of public testimony, I don't think there was.
But again, this is a work session.
So this is what.
Yeah, but I'm still going by that document though. I mean,
Nobody here. Anyway.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Open
Yeah.
and close.
What's that?
Open and close.
There's nobody there, so yeah, so we could close the public hearing. Yes, I think I guess I'll just ask any other thoughts from staff as we close the discussion out on this, or
Chairman, thank you. The only thing I can think of is there's been a lot of discussion already coming through on the Live Work Create related to making really clear and objective standards for a decision document. Typically, staff doesn't have the same decisions that are the required findings for all staff level applications. That would get pretty arduous on staff. And so one thing that we haven't teased out yet that I've had a thought that unless it is triggered, a public hearing is triggered, perhaps, and I don't know the legalities of this, that perhaps there could just be a certification rendered for being in compliance with the design review standards versus going through the strict decision document. That's just an idea. We'll have to look and see if that's even legal. But that's one slight little amendment that I have in the back of my head.
okay. All right, well, I think we got a lot done, I hope, and hopefully it was helpful for you guys. I think I appreciate the commission's thoughtfulness as we discuss this agenda item tonight. Any last thoughts before we adjourn? Okay, I think we're adjourned.
Great.